of that. Yeah, Tracie and Don.
You want to take that, Tracie, or you want?
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, he's asking you specifically, but I'm happy to go first. So for me, speech is that's an issue that is kind of societally gauged, right? So even in the United States, where we have this concept of freedom of speech, we still restrict it. You can't say anything. You can't libel somebody, right? You can't slander them, I should say. I guess both things would be considered speech. You can't threaten a person with a direct threat. And I think what we've seen in the last couple years is that it's a little bit unnerving how some speech seems to be acceptable even when it appears to be a threat that everybody recognizes, and yet people are like, well, they didn't directly threaten, and and so you're looking at it like, hey, this person just said nice dog, be ashamed if something happened to your dog, wouldn't it? And we're going, what the heck, right? And people are like, well, I don't know if that's, he didn't really threaten the dog, he didn't really, hey, look, what do you, so our own restrictions on freedom of speech have some gaps there, right? Where I can literally threaten somebody without using words that will get me in legal trouble, right? I can threaten your kids. I can threaten you to burn your house down if I go that route, right? I mean, so we have a situation where we have freedom of speech, and yet there's still issues with it. And then there's still court cases about freedom of speech, right? So even when you have freedom of speech, it's not cut and dry. It's not like a black and white thing where it's like, here's the line, everybody recognizes it, this is what's allowed, this is what's not allowed. So there's always going to be one of these, this is one of those situations where there's always going to be some fuzziness about the boundary of what you can say and what you can't say. Then the question becomes, like, why do we restrict speech that's like a direct threat? Why can you get arrested if I come to you and I say I'm gonna freaking kill you, I'm gonna go home and get a gun and I'm gonna come to your house and I'm gonna kill you? Why can I be arrested at that point for threatening you when I haven't actually done it, right? I've just said a thing, and yet that's something you can't say. So when you look at it that way, it's like, well, but it shows that you've got this intent, right? So what if I'm speaking and I'm inciting violence? What if I start telling other people, like, get a gun and start going and killing this particular group because, they are really bad and they're, going to come across our border and hurt us? Like, what if I start,
right.
What if I start saying things that incite violence, right? What?
That's why Alex Jones is in hot water these days.
Well, I think he got it for saying that, what was it, that promoting, I guess, that they were lying about the
and then,
mass
and then
killing.
his followers harassed these folks.
And so there's issues like that, right, where you have a situation. So then the question becomes, do certain forms of speech that we maybe don't recognize currently as harmful actually incite people to do harm, right? Are there forms of speech that maybe we need to study better to understand whether or not they have negative impacts that are measurable or demonstrable, and then we can look at laws about whether or not they should be restricted, right? So some people are saying when it comes to hate speech that this actually creates a damage to the culture that can then result in aggression or violence towards certain groups. I'm not saying that's true or false. I'm just saying we need to look at that, because if it's correct that hateful speech leads to hateful behavior or increases it, then we have to look at that and say, well, does it increase it to the point that we want to restrict speech for that or not? I don't have like, when it comes to hate speech, to me, that's sort of a thing where it's like, well, let's look at it, let's study it, let's examine it, and let's see whether or not we think our society should endorse it or not endorse it.
Yeah. Well, your answers have focused mostly on hate speech. When I think of free speech and potentially laws, there's this issue of things like blasphemy laws, where certain speech is disallowed because there's this presumption of protection for a particular group and such. And I'm very, very nervous about those sorts of things. I would err on the side of wanting free speech. Blasphemy laws are almost universally bad. And protection for particular religious views or these sorts of things.
I just look like there's a lot of speech that led up to the Holocaust, and how much of that speech would have been allowed today? How much of that speech would have been restricted? Like, at what point do we? It's a legitimate question to ask whether or not you are allowing speech that leads to damage.
Right.
And I'm okay studying that and making an assessment of it.
Go ahead, Kenny.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Tracie, I think you were a communications major in college. Am I correct?
Yeah, I was.
Listening to the past shows. Yeah, same here. I'm actually studying, hopefully, to finish within next year. But you mentioned that the Holocaust thing. I was actually watching a video about the Prophet of Zod, where he mentioned something about it's all about rhetoric and the rhetoric that you use, and basically comparing the people you don't like to roaches or animals or something. And
Dehumanizing people.
Rwanda.
Sure.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, I think that is the gateway speech, right? When you start to paint a group as subhuman, non-human, less than human, you start opening the door to mentally justifying abuses toward them that they don't deserve the same rights as other human beings, other people, and so that can be, that can be frightening because you first have to dehumanize people in order to commit atrocities against them.
Sure.
Now that doesn't mean that every time you dehumanize somebody, it's going to lead to an atrocity, and that's why I'm saying I'd be okay looking at this issue. I'd be okay studying this issue, seeing what data is available. There may be data available that if I looked at it, I would say, oh yeah, this is not a problem, or yeah, this is a problem. But I don't just inherently say like, oh, I'm anti-hate speech, or I'm for hate speech, or I think it should be protected, or I don't think. I think it should be studied. And I think the damage should be assessed, whether or not it is something that we need to worry about. Or maybe when you combine it with other factors, it becomes a problem, right? It could be that dehumanization plus some other things becomes a dangerous thing. And then you can look at that from the standpoint that we're doing with the gun discussion now, right? We've got this gun thing where we're saying, well, can we look and see, what is dangerous? Is this combined with this, maybe the cops need to go chat with you, right? And so maybe it's not just about saying something dehumanizing. Maybe it's about saying something dehumanizing along with blogging about how you'd like to, see a bunch of people, disappear, or, there could be other factors that you could look at that say maybe it's not just using dehumanizing speech. Maybe there's other aspects of it that when it's combined, you can be recognized as threatening.
So, Kenny, did you have a particular thing that you wanted to, a particular aspect of free speech that you wanted to talk about?
Do you see these verses as hate speech?
Well, I wanted to talk more about the New Zealand shooting thing, since that's more relevant, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in context of that. I think any speech that really is derogative and meant to downgrade a group of people would be considered, well, it depends. It's very nuanced. It's not an objective thing. But yeah, the post that I saw, I think it was Saturday, was like anything related to white supremacy must immediately be like shut down. Facebook should delete all of those accounts. And I disagree with that because I think
well, now wait, because now we're sliding outside of free speech.
I'm sliding. All right, sorry, I don't want to.
Facebook is not the government, right? So Facebook can basically say what exists or doesn't exist on their platform.
They have their own rules that they can enforce.
I say that as somebody who has had stuff pulled down by Facebook and gone into Facebook jail a couple times. So and I fully understand that they have the right to make those decisions. So that they didn't. I'm not screaming like, oh, they took my stuff down, they infringed my speech. They didn't. They enforced their requirements. I had one where I asked them to go back and reconsider it because I thought it was, potentially something that should have been allowed to go up, but they came back and said no. It's like they reconsidered it and they said no. But they're not the government, and they can do that. Okay.
Well, actually, I wanted to get to my second point. I don't want to take up all of your time. I know you guys have a lot of other callers. Would you mind?
Is it going to be about Ephesians?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, Ephesians 5:22 to 5:23. Sorry, just let me pull up the.
We looked this up very quickly before the.
Yeah, I'll read it.
I'll
read it. It's just a couple lines, right? Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was Mr. Atheist video where they were watching this, and do you know Steven Anderson?
I don't. Heard of him? I don't. But if he has an idea that we should hear, feel free to express it.
I think he does. So I was watching like an excerpt of his one. I don't think you'd call it a preaching. It's not positive. Essentially, he's saying that rape doesn't exist in marriage because once someone agrees to marry their partner, then they agree to any sex within the marriage. So whether the wife is not in the mood, or whether the husband is not in the mood, or whether there's like an injury or surgery and they cannot do sexual acts physically, then they still have to do it because according to the Bible, I say so. I thought that listening to this guy, he's crazy, but then like he has a huge congregation listening to him and agreeing with him, and I think that's really toxic. But I wanted to know what your take on, not necessarily Ephesians is, but of people who want to do what they want to do anyways, but then they're just looking for verses in the Bible to justify their actions.
What do I think of them? A lot of times I think they're good, right? So, for example, there are verses in the Bible that say this crap about submitting to your husband, but there are some people who basically use other verses in the Bible because they don't want to do that. So they'll come up with some other biblical passages and construct that basically says that, marriages are equal and that both partners should be treated with, equal respect. And so for me, if I'm going to deal with a Christian, I would rather deal with a Christian who basically has a good moral compass and then interprets the Bible in such a way that it conforms to their moral compass than I would dealing with people who just do crappy things because they're in the Bible.
Well, I mean, that's the way that I looked at my religion, and sometimes my mom or dad would say, oh, this is like some years ago, but they'd say that I'm interpreting it wrong, but this is how I see the interpretation, so I'm not sure how it's wrong.
The Bible's a Rorschach test. You can read anything you want into it. And so it's not a basis for morality.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is when he says, "What is my opinion of people that conform the Bible to their own views?"
That's what everybody does.
Most times, well, I mean, no. When I was in church, right, it was like we would see a passage like this, and that was what it said, and so that's what it said, and that's what we did. And whether I agreed with it or not, I would conform to it because I had to believe that God knew more than I did.
There's a more nuanced question here of, it can be spun all sorts of different ways.
Yes, it can, but a biblical literalist, right? Somebody who says, like you were saying earlier, when you're reading that and you're saying it says to, kill people who are gay, a biblical literalist would say, yeah, it says that, and that's right. And a person who is kind of interpreting it in their own way is going to look at it and say, well, it says that, but you got to understand, and they're going to get to the end where gay is fine. And so what I'm saying is that when he asks, what's my opinion of those people, I'd so much rather live in a world with moral people who are going to make the Bible serve their moral interest than people who are going to do immoral things because the Bible tells them to. And even though they're sitting there saying, wow, this seems really immoral, but, God knows better, so I better go do this. I mean, that person is much more frightening to me. And I was that person. Right. That's why. It was frightening. I'm like,
I don't know of too many people that actually follow the Bible. Right. That it seems like it's almost always that they're justifying whatever they want to with the Bible.
I'm telling you
ignoring this part. And
when you get into the literalist authoritarian churches, there are a lot of people doing things that they don't feel comfortable with because they believe that's what that Bible says. And they are violating themselves. And what he's describing is the person who basically says, since I think this is wrong, I'm going to find a way to make the Bible agree with me. And then I'm going to go out and say that it's wrong to be a bigot toward gay people. And the Bible, supports me. I may not agree with what they're interpreting as the Bible, but they are much better, much more positive in their social impact than somebody who basically says, I really feel bad because I have friends who are gay and I think they're good people, but the Bible says they're horrible, so I just have to see them as sinners and they deserve hell. And, and by rights they ought to be, executed. Right. I mean, that's just messed up. But there are people who do that.
And from our perspective, the Bible has no bearing on anything. It's a pointless distraction. Right. If something is good and moral, you should be able to defend it as such. If it's not, it's not. The Bible's irrelevant. Anyway, that needed to be said.
By the way, sorry, it's just Tracie. You brought something up. Sorry, Doug? Is that your name?
Tracie and Don.
Don, sorry, I'm horrible with names.
No worries.
Sorry, Don, I'm not giving you as much attention as I am Tracie. But Tracie, you did bring up the homosexual thing. I am bisexual, and that sort of caused problems at home. Long story short, anyway, so there's this super religious guy who I follow, or we're not really friends, but I asked him if homosexuality.
You've got some static happening. Just FYI, there's something going on with your mic.
Sorry, can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, I asked him a yes/no question. Does he think homosexuality should be illegal? And he gave me a runaround answer. I don't know. Do you want me to read his response or just the gist of what he's saying?
No, I mean, so what's the question? Can you summarize?
Yeah, I can summarize it.
Yeah.
So he said that the whole gay thing, whatever that is, he doesn't understand it. It disgusts him, and that he thinks it's up to the sinner and their God, and they'll be punished accordingly. And that he doesn't think that the gays should be allowed around children, and it's a very narrow-minded perspective of the entire thing. But I like talking to him because he gives me a general idea of basically the conservative, I don't want to be unfair, but conservative mindset.
Yeah. No, I would say that's pretty conservative.
Yeah.
Very,
but not too unusual.
No, I don't think so. It's just within the LGBT community, I talked to certain people, and it's like they were at some point suicidal. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day about that. And to think that, this could be the ultimatum, and he's still willing to keep his narrow-minded opinions, it just sort of irritates me. But I don't know.
Okay. Well, we have certainly covered a lot of topics here on this call. So
Yeah,
I'm going to go ahead and let you go. I'm going to let you go, Kenny.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Woo. Okay.